It's episode 8 of The Boost with Lightfully Behavioral Health's CEO, Jennifer Steiner, and their Chief Growth Officer, Andie Hollowell. Let's go. All right. Welcome to episode 8 of The Boost, Conversations with People Promoting Mental Health. And I am delighted to be here with Jennifer Steiner and Andie Hollowell, LMFT, both from Lightfully Behavioral Health. Andie and Jennifer, how are you both?
I'm good.
Great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Fantastic. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here with you. So we're just going to jump right in, as we always do with all our guests, with two things. One is the virtual hug and the shameless plug. So the virtual hug is tell us each somebody or something you're thankful for today.
Okay. Well, I actually had a really fun experience this weekend. On Saturday, my husband and I went to see Beth Hart in concert, and she played here in Ojai. And I just felt so grateful to have witnessed her magic. I feel like she is one of the best female vocalists of all time. And it was just such a powerful thing to witness. Just so creative, so vulnerable, a lot of raw authenticity. And it's hard to not come away feeling inspired and creative yourself when you get to witness that in somebody else. So I'm feeling super grateful for that today.
That's awesome. And Ojai, fewer places better to catch an artist or a musician than that magical little corner of the world. How about you, Jennifer?
Okay, I'm going to go a very different way. I am feeling grateful for one of my kiddos today who it went on her very first job interview. And it was just so sweet to see her preparing and how excited she was and how nervous she was. It reminded me, it brought me back to those early days of like all the promise and hope in the world. So anyhow, just feeling very grateful for her today. I'm very proud of her.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I hope she lands whatever she's going after. So on the heels of that, the shameless plug, this is just a moment to hear it from the people who live it and breathe it every day, especially Lightfully, which is we'll talk about just on an incredible growth trajectory. We're going to talk about the culture and the marketing and everything that goes into sustaining that level of growth while caring for the people who are both within that organization and then benefiting from that organization. So let's hear it from you, and feel free to brag a little bit because you're doing beautiful work. But the shameless plug, just tell us what you're doing and what it is that you're doing so unique in this industry in this part of the world.
Sounds good. I'll get us started. So I founded Lightfully about roughly 18 months ago is when the concept was created, and we began this effort. And it was, right in the thralls of COVID. And we were all feeling and experiencing really like the second pandemic. I mean, the explosion of mental health conditions and the acuity level of mental health conditions is just so on the rise. And I wanted to be part of the solution. I wanted to step up and do something. And so Lightfully was founded to be that. And we provide general mental health treatment. So we treat conditions like depression, anxiety, trauma, personality disorders. And we do it at what we call middle acuity level of care. So a step up from outpatient care, sort of everything between outpatient care and inpatient. And so that's what we're doing is I like to reference the poem, the man in the arena, but I prefer the woman in the arena version. So we are in the arena trying to be part of the solution for mental health pandemic. And we are doing this in a way that is what I would say beautifully authentic, It is women led and women powered company, and doing it with a real focus on caring for our people and our culture. So,
Mhm.
Andie, what would you add? Andie and I have been together since the beginning here in this effort. So, what would you add, Andie?
Sure. I would just add that another really big mission of ours is not only providing really exceptional quality care to those that come into our doors, but really expanding access to care. So, when we launched, we were brick and mortar facilities. So, of course, we've got these beautiful residential facilities and these standalone partial hospitalization intensive outpatient centers, but also we are trying to support clients that are in more rural areas that maybe don't have as much immediate access to care. And so we expanded into the virtual space as well. And so now we're doing virtual treatment for both adults and teens across the state of California and the state of Colorado, quickly expanding into other states coming soon. But I think that's just such an important conversation for us to be having and investing time in now is, just finding the broadest reach and how can we support the most humans possible in our care.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's this broad middle swath sort of, and part of my belief is that we're actually always going to need a sort of federally supported safety net, if you will, for the very critically complex mental illness cases in the world and in our country. And then you have sort of a top level, talk therapy care and maintenance. And I think that's very powerful in terms of what we're doing for ourselves. And you're kind of working in this broad middle market. How did you identify that? And maybe throw this to Jennifer, because um, it's obvious that you have such market traction. I think you're aiming toward 30 locations in the near future, and yeah, multi-state, as Andie mentioned. But how did you actually identify from a market strategy standpoint that this was the place to be and these were the services to provide?
Yeah, great question. So prior to Lightfully, I was leading an eating disorder company at similar levels of care. So we were a middle acuity provider in the eating disorder space. And something that started happening was we were seeing a lot of clients who really weren't eating disorder primary. They were mental health primary. And we would seek to place them in a program like Lively, and we couldn't find many. It certainly couldn't find good quality care that was like replicable across sites, and we would know we're sure we're going to get comparable quality. So I started to see that gap in the market. We used to call them unicorn programs because they were very difficult to find. And then, as I had mentioned, with the COVID impact and the tremendous amount of pain that outpatient therapists started to feel because they couldn't handle the acuity levels they were seeing, that was just like a double reminder. And then I think the third part I noticed was, there's a decent amount of market presence in eating disorders, fairly consolidated. There's some big good providers, and similarly, a lot of providers in the substance abuse space. But like really, there was a void of providers that were general mental health focused and specialized, not doing sort of like a little twist on substance abuse and commingling programs as dual diagnosis, but like truly addressing these disorders from a mental health lens. So like to me, it was like the screaming of the opportunity. Like this is so wide open. Somebody needs to do this. It was clear to me.
Mm-hmm. So partly that was your experience in the market to say, hey, there's pretty much an obvious problem here that people aren't addressing with enough urgency, which is we need more of these unicorns. We need actually these unicorns to just be horses. We need more of this in the market. And you found traction quickly that way. And it's amazing. I think I'm right that you launched in 2022, you said, and started with a couple programs, and now, now you're in the teens and heading toward 30. And you are, Jennifer, from Santa Barbara, or you live in Santa Barbara, and I was doing my homework, and Oprah is one of your favorite people. So I hope if you haven't had lunch with her yet, that we can make that happen from this podcast. I'm going to dream really big.
Thank you, Steve.
I,
I just had a fairly significant birthday, Steve, back in December, and my fiance planned a surprise party, which I didn't know obviously at the time. And he told me that evening, he said, "Get dressed up nicely because we're going to dinner and there's a special guest." And I was convinced. It's finally happening. It's finally happening. I'm going to meet Oprah. So when I opened the door to the party, I was equally as surprised to see all of my lovely friends and family, but also a little niche disappointed that Oprah wasn't there. So yes, it's my dream. It's my dream.
Good. Well, we're going to facilitate that at some point. And so I've pulled a couple Oprah quotes and then a couple Peter Drucker quotes based on something you said. So I'll throw this to both of you as you're doing this important heart work. And Jennifer, you've got your MBA, and Andie, you're an LMFT. So you come at this from I think, critically important angles when you're building a company like this personally. But Oprah said this: so everybody has a calling, and your real job in life is to figure out as soon as possible what that is, who you were meant to be, and to begin to honor that in the best way possible for yourself. So the question is, from a professional work standpoint, how did you hear your calling? How did you hear your vocation? And either one of you launch into that.
Go for it, Andie.
This is such a good question. I feel like I could take it so many ways. But I think I'll start with one of the really awesome practices that we have at Lightfully is we encourage everybody that comes on board. It is part of, I think, our company culture to evaluate what your values are and like what drives you, what your purpose is. And I think through that practice and having some understanding, like I am really just driven by the values of growth and service. And I think those are two traits that have really sort of been the common thread throughout my life and throughout my professional world as well. And so, I knew that I wanted to do something where I was helping other individuals. And I knew it was something where I wanted to be a part of and get to witness the transformation of something going from here to here. And it's similar for me in why I love the therapeutic process so much. You get to see that with human beings. And it's also the same feeling that I get in growing teams and growing departments and growing organizations, like getting to inspire and to be a part of something going from a seedling and to helping to nurture that thing and watch it grow felt very, very important to me. And so, of course, becoming a therapist was a big piece of that. And then from that, stepping into positions where I got to do a similar type of work with industries and groups. And I think one step further, just as far as my purpose in my work, I think with those that are on my team, I really feel compelled to sort of help light the path for others that have maybe had a similar experience as myself. So, I didn't always feel comfortable in every room that I stepped into. Like I didn't come from a place of, my parents didn't have a lot of power or privilege. Like I didn't know what it took to be at the table in a boardroom or to, step up and level up in my career into higher levels of leadership. So that feels very important to me as well, like lighting the path for other women and disenfranchised humans that just like want to do more and want to do better and just aren't really certain of the path. So I think that's a really common theme for me as well. And I try and do a little bit of that every day in everything that I do and find other, unique ways to do that in the world. So I think that's probably mine.
So I want to hear from Jennifer also, but just to follow on there. So you were practicing, was there like trepidation, or was it just a confident leap of faith to go to Lightfully? Like, because that's a very different role than, day-to-day therapy versus chief growth officer at a
Mm,
hyper
sure.
expansion organization. But what was that like for you?
Well, you zoomed me forward really quickly, but there was many, many steps in between those two things. When I had went back to graduate school to become a therapist, I had already had some other experiences in really like the financial sales industry. And so my background really was in sales. And then I went back to grad school. And so I feel like I already kind of held um, two different pieces of what my job is now. But just being someone I think who leans into new opportunities, I didn't always know what this path was going to look like. But, I was working, this was a couple organizations ago, and they were like, hey, we're trying to expand into this area and we need someone who can help us do that and do outreach. And, not really understanding maybe that's exactly where I wanted to be, but understanding that like, hey, I'm a really quick learner. I just want to do my part in helping this thing grow into whatever it's going to be, and being willing to lean into new opportunities, even though they were scary. And I think that's a common thing with those of us at Lightfully. Be brave is one of our shining commitments. And, so I think it's important to think about those things. We don't always go into opportunities knowing all of the things that we need to know. But I think if we have confidence in ourselves and our ability to, pull the appropriate people around us that can help guide us to do those things, then, why not get into the arena, like Jennifer said, and see what you can do. So.
Yeah. So there were stepping stones along the way. And I certainly can relate to, I didn't grow up with silver spoon privilege per se. Certainly had, a family that cared for us and provided shelter and food and all of those things, which are, of course, blessings in my life. But regardless of your circumstance, you never quite have full certainty over what could potentially happen, in part because life is so complex. Like there's so many choices and decisions and luck as a part of it, and just circumstance. So it's fascinating to me. I went through this phase where I was making the dumbest parody music videos, and they're so bad and so silly, and they were aimed at like youth. My daughter had just come into the world, and so I was just in this sort of like muse renaissance moment, and I was just thinking, what am I doing this for? Why am I doing this? And so then to fast forward to today, and yes, stepping stones along the way, but to be in a place where I can use some decent video chops and audio skills to put together conversations like this, it's phenomenal. So Jennifer, in light of Andie, I think teed it up for you really nicely. I'd love to hear sort of about your calling, your vocation, and especially, or including, the culture aspect, which really resonates through sort of your 7 beliefs or your 7 pillars that this whole company is built on. And correct me if I'm wrong, but more often than not, I think that does come from the leadership and trickles down through, through the hierarchy and through all the employees and the structure of the company. But what about your vocation, and how did you find it and lock into it?
Yeah, well, I always like to emphasize that, like you said, I think life is a combination of um, happenstance and intention and everything in between. And I tell that to my kids a lot. Don't feel like you have to have it figured out. Like it just don't. But I was actually an anthropology major. So culture, it's fascinating now to look back and go, whoa, like culture started there.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to be an anthropologist. And to my, my parents were correct. When I graduated, there were not very many anthropology jobs. So
There's a lot of anthropology, the retail store jobs. I don't know.
I know, exactly. I don't even think that existed back
I
then. But
don't
yes.
even know.
So so yeah, I didn't have an anthropology job when I graduated, and I sort of fumbled into a job in for a large skilled nursing company, and found my way all over that company and learning about business. But what now in retrospect was the theme. There's a couple of themes, and one big one was helping people that are in a vulnerable part of life. Actually, when I look back across the whole stretch of my career, it's whether it's serving people in skilled nursing, in hospice, in dialysis, in mental health crisis, right? Like clearly what gets me out of bed is of being of service to people who are struggling, and I think we all, whether ourselves or in our families, have been in those times where, it feels very scary and dark, and our life is in the hands of somebody else. And it's just an honor to like be of support to people who are there. So that was a thread for sure. As I mentioned, the culture piece has been like a throughput as well. And really this need to connect for me, like who am I as a human being, what's important to me, and I don't want to be compartmentalized, and where that's just like when I'm not at work. So this desire, to create a work environment where I can be in my values, be authentic, allow for others to do the same, creates a really different kind of experience. I mean, life is too short to not be fully living in our values in the day or night or anywhere in between. And then I'd say the last big thread for me was just this struggle that I experienced as a female. And, not the sort of overt stuff that you hear about in the Me Too movement, but more along the lines of, I just didn't feel like I fit in very well. And when I looked to different leaders growing up in my career, I just was like, wow, that doesn't look or feel like who I am. So I had this conflict going on of like, ooh, do I emulate? I was smart enough to know I could emulate certain behaviors to get like taken seriously and to get the promotion, but it felt really icky. And I was like wishing for a world where I could be really myself and bring my strengths forward, and for that to be valued. So I was like, that was where I was striving of like, hey, if I can actually create a company, then I can make that possible. Like I can open up the possibilities for all different kinds of leaders, not just like a certain profile. So I think there was like this like hidden pull that was happening inside of me. Like I want to lead, I want to lead, I want to lead because I wanted to be given that opportunity. So
yeah, and you want to do it in an authentic way, which aligns with the sort of the second thing you said. And this is so catching that echo again. We're just going to roll with it.
Okay, I don't hear
so that's really inspiring to me. And in an interview, you said, we're sort of taught to be emotionless and directive, and the know-it-all good leader. And certainly, leaders need to figure out a way to live in and with conflict. And we think there's maybe only one right way to do that, but just in my own path, being able to identify with what you just said, as there's aspects of me that have that same leadership longing or that leadership drive, and that's come out in different ways across the years, and still on that path, sort of seeking and searching what that looks like. But it was just so encouraging reading back on your life a little bit, how you felt like you came to that place where you said, yes, I can be an authentic leader and be myself entirely. I think that's so cool.
Thank you. And mainly it's cool for me because it gives others permission to do the same. Like there's I'll never forget one little email that I got from a really young woman in a company I was leading. And she said something like, I never thought of myself as leader material before I worked with you in this company, because it just like, I never fit the profile. And now I believe in myself. And I'm like, whoa, that's what fills my cup. Like, I forget the dollars and the, the accomplishments and the titles. Like, that's what fills my cup, is like inspiring someone else to do the same.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. What impact you're having on people's lives in different ways. Okay, so let's jump forward to actually you tell me, Jennifer, do you want to go Oprah quote or Peter Drucker quote? This is choose your own adventure now.
Oh man, I have to go Oprah, because like this is it. This is going to be the podcast that perks her interest. Right?
This is the
I
one.
love Peter. I love Peter, but
Yeah, but
let's
later
go all Oprah.
Yeah.
when you're in Napa at lunch telling this story, you're gonna say, "Oh yeah, I doubled down on Oprah, and it made all the difference." She says this: "Think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is another stepping stone to greatness." So, in this environment where nothing is guaranteed and there is failure, or past iterations where maybe you learn from, in addition to the constant risk, the everyday you try to calculate and mitigate risk. What is the concept of failure mean to you in terms of how you've learned to interpret it when it happens or when you feel like it's happening? And is there one maybe big life lesson or takeaway for the audience that they can maybe it transforms their perspective on failure, which can be a really sad, hurtful thing, and we can take it really personally. But what does that topic mean to you when Oprah says, "Hey, think like a queen. The queen's actually not afraid to fail"?
Andie, do you want to take this?
Sure. I mean, so many good things and so many good examples of this, I think, at Lightfully and with our leaders. But, leaning into or launching a startup organization, like, you got to expect there are going to be some failures. And I think the beautiful thing about failure is really the opportunity for learning and growth. And I think if, you create an environment where it is safe to fail, and we do look at it as like, hey, what can we learn from this, and how can we do better next time, or how can this inform what we're doing to make the lives of our staff better, the lives of other humans better. I think you really create a new narrative and reframe what failure means. But I think that first piece of it being a safe place to fail is just, I can't say enough about how important that is, because I have worked in other atmospheres that is not the case, and it doesn't feel safe to fail. And so I think it's important to both create a culture and a sense of psychological safety around that, because that's really when I think you see people and teams blossom and do their best work. And it's going to be messy, and that's sort of how we get the best ideas and create the best things. Like, you've got to kind of throw some things out there and go, hey, I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to go after it and figure it out. And creating some paths for learning for yourself. So I think it's huge and it's important.
Yeah, one of our company values, our shining commitments, we call them is wabi sabi, which is, for those viewers or listeners that don't know the concept, it's this idea of like all the broken things put together to make something beautiful. It's the beauty in imperfection. But Steve, you talk a lot about innovation. Well, innovation does not happen in an environment where people feel like they need to be perfect. So we've actually like held up this concept of imperfection and failure as like not only is it okay, but like, please do it. Because we're going to get the best of you, if you feel free and safe to mess up. And so it's critically important, I think, for innovation to happen.
That's huge.
One of my favorite practices, Steve, that we do on a monthly, we have an all company call monthly, and every month a different leader will share a failure or a big mistake. And I think it creates a sense of safety around vulnerability. You know, when you've got your CEO on a call saying like, hey, here's a time when I had a big uh-oh, and here's what I learned from that, right? Like, I think it creates, again, that psychological safety, and then also the sense that these are opportunities for growth. These are not things that are going to hold us back. These are actually things that can propel us forward if we can look at them from the right perspective. So I love that practice.
Yeah. Jennifer, when you mentioned wabi sabi, I was about to mention wabi sabi, and I think it's because I learned it from Andie. Actually, I learned that term, and because what Andie was talking about was so core. It's so aligned with your values. I was talking with this person, Brian Kramer is his name, and he says that brands actually need three things in order to be facilitating human to human connection, and it's simplicity, and it's empathy, and it's imperfection. So for you to highlight imperfection in wabi sabi, it's not only it's beautiful because you're flipping the incentive structure, and lots of people have been in companies where the incentive structure is do not take risks and get in line and sit in the meeting and don't speak up, and certainly don't make mistakes, and certainly don't talk about your mistakes if you make them. And to flip all of that expectation on its head and say, no, actually, we're going to intentionally live this out, because not only is it not a weakness, but it's helpful. And to Brian's perspective and from your perspective both, it's actually beneficial to the organization and to innovation moving forward.
For sure.
That's
And this
so cool.
This ties a lot into when I was saying, hey, like, I don't feel like I fit the bill, growing through my career of leader, because, so many of the leaders conveyed or portrayed themselves as like, I have all the answers, come to me, the wise one. And I never really felt like that. I mean, I have good skills, and and so, and when you really get down to it, I don't think any of us really feel like that. So like, that's where the idea is just like, let's get rid of that and just let's just be comfortable asking hard questions and excavating things, because that's actually how we get to solution making.
Yeah. So. And to circle back, maybe just what you said circled me back to Oprah's quote about queenship, and great queens and kings we've maybe seen in history have the ability to lift other people up. They have the ability to serve sort of an archetype even bigger than themselves. It's almost like they're being in leadership for the sake of something much grander than their own ego. And when their ego gets involved, then it turns into a tyrant, or it turns into sort of the child king, and it goes unhealthy pretty quickly. So for you to be able to lift people up in your role, it's a loose comparison, but there are some ways that a company can walk and talk a little bit like this kingdom that you've formed, so there's an analogy that sometimes circles through my head. But okay, so you mentioned innovation, and so I'm out of Oprah quotes, although there are thousands out there, but there is this one, and it's 50% for you, Jennifer, and 50% for you, Andie. So maybe we'll start on the innovation side and move to the marketing side. But Peter Drucker writes, because the purpose of business is to create a customer, the business enterprise has two and only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. Marketing and innovation produce results. All the rest are costs. Marketing is the distinguishing unique function of the business. So marketing is a broad term there from Drucker's perspective. But Jennifer, why don't you tackle innovation and sort of what would you say Lightfully is doing from an innovation standpoint, and as much as you can give us kind of a peek into the future, because part of your role is to be futuristic.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think there's a couple of really big areas. So if, bringing us back to the original, why do we exist, right? It was to fill this, what I saw as a need, a hole in the market. But there are some real challenges with providing care for people in behavioral health care at these levels of care in a consistent, high quality way. And so just go with me for a second because this takes a moment to explain.
Let's go.
Okay, let's do this. So when you think about medical care, non-behavioral, right? So like where most of the energy has gone in our nation around healthcare, it's been on the medical side. There is a level of consistency of protocol, of reliability of what you're getting, whether you go to this hospital or that hospital, right? There's like, so there's been a lot of work, I think, around ensuring like consistent protocol. I know what I'm going to get when I have this knee issue, like these things are going to happen. Okay, on the behavioral side, because it's such a new industry, I mean, it really is a new budding part of healthcare. It really has been the Wild West. And we have, a world where the amount of consistency and structure has been, I mean, we're just learning, we're limited in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So I've said in a few interviews, like I seek to be the DaVita of mental health care. And for those listeners or viewers that don't know DaVita, they're the world's largest dialysis company. And what they're known for is a true like consistency of care, whether you're getting care in the United States or in China or wherever it is. And so that's my goal, is that I want to be a provider where we've taken kind of this Wild West of the mental health space and created so much more consistency and rigor and structure. So at our levels of care, if you think about, okay, I've given you the main diagnoses that we treat. We treat depression, anxiety, trauma, PTSD. Well, there are hundreds of diagnoses and there are hundreds of modalities, right, that have been developed to treat these diagnoses. So let's just stop for a minute and think about how complicated this gets when you have someone at an elevated level of care that present with, a couple of comorbidities. How are you going to consistently provide that treatment across countries when it's like there's this matchy match game of, okay, well, this person just presented with trauma, we need an EMDR therapist, or this person presented with an anxiety, we need this kind of therapist. So it's just unrealistic, and it's truly a problematic way that this sector has been set up. So what we have done at Lightfully that I'm so proud of, that is going to help us to create this consistency, is we have aligned with what's called process-based therapy framework. This is the next generation of work of Stephen Hayes. And in a nutshell, in a non-clinical way, what this is we've taken all the madness of the hundreds of modalities, and he's boiled it down to really 12 key areas of suffering and a set number of key interventions that are all evidence-based that sort of carry across all of these modalities. So it's like we're taking down the madness and bringing it to a very consistent way of looking at a client's presentation of symptoms and creating a care plan with a set of protocols that are not from hundreds and hundreds, but from 12 key areas, and applying that consistently from location to location, from client to client. Thus, not only is our delivery consistent, but then the outcomes that we're experiencing are consistent and reliable, right? This is the next generation of mental health care, and like that's what we're doing here at Lightfully. So that's what I would say on the innovation front is front and center.
That's huge. Yeah. And on, like whether it's CBT or what have you, sort of my understanding of that approach is that you can reach into some of the best, most effective, treatments and diagnoses from your perspective, and not be fenced in necessarily by one process or one modality. And there's also a wonderful level set or a foundation of outcomes, which has always been, one of the concerns. And so we'll start to be able to have some more quantitative, more reliable, more rigorous outcomes that we can rely on and improve from. But you sort of have to start somewhere and then build. So to have the 12 that have been identified, not to say there aren't hundreds, but the 12 most important let you provide that level of care in a way that is innovative for today and going forward.
Absolutely. You got it. So,
Awesome. Okay. So what about the marketing, Andie? Tell us about,
Yeah.
I know you've launched a new website recently. You've got that cool Tolstoy video on there that answers some of the most pressing questions right out of the gate. But talk us
Yeah.
through your marketing strategy, what you're doing, what you're not doing as it relates to promoting mental health in California and beyond.
Sure. Well, I think a good place to start would be connecting this to sort of what Jennifer was sharing with our approach to treating clients and process-based therapy. I think one of the things that we believe very strongly in is we treat human beings. We don't just treat the diagnosis. We see each and every individual as a human with unique needs. And it's important to us to really customize what we're doing to each and every individual. And I think you've heard some of this in our conversations, but I think as a whole, Lightfully is incredibly human. Like we believe in being authentic and being vulnerable. And so I think with all of that being said, organic marketing efforts is something that we were leaning into pretty heavily this year. Not only because it's a more authentic way to engage with your audience, but ultimately it's more sticky. I think that if Lightfully can create content that is incredibly valuable in all of our videos, posts, articles, and that we're really just presenting very thoughtful solutions to the problems that people are searching for in real time, like that's where we bring real value to the market and where we're going to connect with our clients. And so that feels very, very important to me. And both in, short form and long form content. I mean, I think we all know that attention spans are getting squeezed, right? And so we have a lot of these platforms where we can offer more compelling information to some of our younger audience. So, things like TikTok and Instagram, things like that. It's very important for us to be able to be authentic and also concise and like get them the information right away that they need to know. And also establish ourselves as a trusted source within the mental health field and the wider market. I mean, so many young folks are going to TikTok for therapy these days, if you can call it that. And so, being amongst a sea of lots of information, it's really important, I think, that we establish ourselves as both credible, but also human and like, hey, we see you, we see your struggle. And here are some very practical ways that we can help you right now. And if you decide to reach out for further support with our teams. I think, we're trying to really create content right now that is going to educate, encourage, and inspire. And some of those like more long form versions of content just give us more real estate to do that. So, just in terms of SEO, really focusing on that and video content to give us some more of the higher ranking, stuff that you get with GA4 now with all of the adjustments that they've made. So I think those are the areas that we're really, really focused on, just creating really quality, really human content that is going to be compelling and helpful more than anything else, because people are suffering. So, how do we find a solve to that?
Yeah. Yeah. The organic move feels like the long game. And I almost always
Sure.
prefer to play the long game, although that's not to say that it can't be just the right piece of content for a moment in time when a parent or a family member or, the customer, client, or patient themselves, depending on how you talk about them, are ready for that message. And then they can sit with that, 700-word blog post, or they can sit with that video and really learn from you. But that's a very human approach to have a mix as well, because a lot of kids are on YouTube. They're kind of fading Facebook, I think is how kids would say it. But TikTok, and other platforms, Instagram coming on very strong. So you do have to be aware of meeting people where they are in their humanity. So it's certainly understandable that you don't have just one channel. But what about your website? That place, it's sort of the new front door for a company, what were the signals that said, okay, this is the time to invest in a new upgraded website? And what were a couple of the big goals that you wanted to have as outcomes with a successful project like that? And it is really beautiful. It's really successful, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I think it was, like everything else with the startup, like there's a progression of things. And as we launched and as we started treating clients, we learned a lot. And when Lightfully first launched, we were going to treat adults with primary mental health. We wanted this unicorn offering of a program that was going to serve adults with primary mental health. And what became very evident very, very quickly was there was an overwhelming need for a really quality provider in the teen space as well. And so launching the teen product halfway through last year, a couple of the things that stuck out to me as I was looking at our website as both a human and a mom of a teen herself, I felt like we needed to do two things. One, I wanted to create really clarity of what it is that we are doing here, and also differentiation between the adult product and the teen product. And I call them products, but they're really service offerings, right? In what we do. Because I think it is, we're treating primary mental health in both cases, but there are some very unique things in that stage of development with teens that I think we need to be prepared to address and speak to. And so it felt really important for me to be able to just show how those two service offerings are different, and also in the same family of offerings in our PBT approach. And also, thirdly, I think that we just, you mentioned the Tolstoy video, which has Jennifer's lovely face as the first one that pops up. We like to tease her a little bit about that on some of our individual calls. Anytime you go to the website, there's Jennifer giving you
we
tips
call it
and
little
advice.
Jennifer.
But it just felt like a way to both extend a really human, like you see somebody's face, like we're not just a website, we're not just these brick and mortar facilities, but we are live humans within these spaces that are helping to care for the humans that come to see us. And so it felt important to have a human connection, and also to have a little of your choose your own journey feel, if you will. Not every person that comes to our website is struggling with the same exact thing. So how can we help them most quickly get to the information that they need and the questions that they have? And so, developing tools that I think can help with that pathway was really, really important to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the humanity of that. I totally want to try that on our website for the conference I run, but also you retooled your website in part to get real crisp and clear about your messaging and communication around your products or services, and then also some audiences that you needed to really make sure you were serving with from the very beginning. The customer experience is the very same as what they get throughout. So Jennifer, we're going to wrap up, but I do want to leave you with one question, and maybe you can close us out. So there's you mentioned early on, and it's true. I think there's the Ernst and Young survey, a few years ago that was referenced in an article about how like it's 20% of funded companies are women led. You said you're women led and women powered, women founded at Lightfully. What is and then you have this Lead Like a Chick initiative as well that I want to learn more about. So what's your passion about that, and what would you encourage maybe somebody, some future person that you can maybe their life you can impact with something you say here about what it takes to be a woman entrepreneur, female-led company, and what's your mindset there?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, obviously, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. We've talked quite a bit about the journey of like authenticity, which is one of my two values, authenticity and courage, actually. But we've talked a lot about that, right? Where I think my desire for encouraging women leadership is really my desire for encouraging authentic leadership, whether that's women leaders or male leaders or non-binary leaders. It's being okay and welcomed and empowered as yourself to lead. And I think given your quote, and I've heard different statistics, I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. I think right now it's 4% of companies of scale are led by women. Wow, that one's pretty mind-boggling. And what we know is that, women-led companies have, not only do they create, I think, more inclusive environments, but they also create more economic value. So it's the facts are sort of there, and so it's what's getting in our way, and why is this a slow progression? And I mean, clearly a really complicated societal challenge for us to tackle. But I think my little corner here is how promoting sort of the value of what it can look like for a women-led company to make change in how we experience the work environment, as well as how we impact a really important need in our country. And so if I can just keep doing the thing and being successful, that's my contribution, right? That hopefully it's noticed. Again, whether on the human side of hey, we're making the world a better place and we're a safe landing place for people who need help, or on the economic side of, hey, we've just created value, right, for shareholders and we're doing our part in our economic growth. All of the above, just do the good work. So that's what I do. If I get too philosophical, Steve, I can just get myself all twisted around.
Yeah.
So keeping it simple. And what I say to women leaders, women, whether it's on my team or people that I've connected with, is, don't fit the mold. I know it feels like we have to at times, that's the way we're going to get from point A to point B, but do our best to stay authentic. Don't do it because when we're authentic, it's when we shine the brightest. And it's when we'll find our path. It's when those things will unfold for us that they're meant to. It's when we feel empowered in the day. It's when we want to get out of bed and do the things. So just stay there, and everything else will find its way.
Yeah, with authenticity and courage combined as you do that work. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being on the Boost, and I'm thrilled that y'all are coming out to Nashville. I just said y'all, but your executive that slipped out. Your executive team is coming to the Mental Health Marketing Conference to present more about sort of a multifaceted approach and look at growing a company and what it takes to keep the culture. It's obviously an authentic thing, and it's fun to talk with you today about it. I can't wait to share this out with our audience, but thank you both for being on the show today.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you,
I love your
Steve.
podcast. So I appreciate you giving us the time and asking so many great questions. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And when you go to lunch with Oprah, let me know. I'll send you a bottle of wine or something.
Thank you.
Yep,
I'm so excited for it. I can't wait.
Just a matter of time now. Let's just hit publish. All right. With that, let's sign off. Have a good one.
Thanks.
You too.
Bye-bye.